Hi folks, welcome to Set Up Our Homestead. This is Travis, and today it's communities, tribes, groups, lone wolves. What does that all mean, and how's that going to affect you, which is a better way to go? Well, can't really give you the advice on which you should seek out to be, but I can kind of tell you some of my opinions and things that I've looked into. I have actually, strangely, I don't know why, for the last several years, I have looked into the idea of more of a kind of the tribal community, intentional community setting, and what that might benefit to living from a homesteading and from a preparedness standpoint and perspective. And I'm not talking about just everyone living on the same piece of property in a communal type situation. It may include that, but that's not exactly what I'm talking about. To be honest with you, I am a fairly closed off person. That may seem kind of strange since I'm on here on YouTube, but if you guys have noticed, I'm kind of protective about my personal life. It's not that I'm trying to necessarily hide anything bad that I don't want you to know. I'm just trying to keep that personal. Showing off more of the lay of the land, where you could figure out maybe a little bit more where the place is, that sort of stuff. I'm kind of a closed off personal guy. It takes a little while to get into my inner circle, I guess you could say. Now, once that happens, I'm as loyal as they come. But, I'm a little bit more cautious when it comes to befriending people, especially, becoming close friends with someone. But on the other hand, I see the definite benefits to having a close-knit community and, a tribe type of community. And again, I'm not talking about just living on the same property like a commune. But I could definitely see the benefits. I think I'm going to talk first, though, about lone wolves. Kind of get that out of the way, and then maybe go from there. I'm not opposed to that idea. I don't think it's necessarily the best idea. I think if it brings a whole new level of problems if you're the only person out there, on your own trying to survive. I know from a homesteading standpoint, it's just us, our family here, and so it is 2 adults, but it's still tough. And I think of times, how much different it would be if there was, say 3 or 4 families working together on a piece of property. How much easier that would be to get things done. I mean, it would make a lot of things easier. Of course, that also brings with its own set of difficulties and challenges to overcome. But as a lone wolf, while and you may be that way because of uncontrolled circumstances, and you just may choose that way. You have to think about things that are a little different than if there's several of you. You have to sleep sometime. So you can't provide your own security all the time, because, well, you got to rest. If you get injured, you need to make sure you have adequate medical supplies and know how to use them, and have plans of, what happens if you get down because of an injury or something. Of course, you have less food to stock up on, things like that. And it's the same way on a homestead. If you're homesteading now, living off the land as much as possible. You have less garden to work in. You don't have to garden as much. You don't have to harvest as much. But you also are doing it alone, and you're doing everything alone. So there's definitely some disadvantages there. I'm not saying it's impossible at all. I just think it's going to be a little tougher in a lot of ways. You may have less work in certain areas, but you're doing all the work, on your own. And from a, SHTF situation, security is going to be a big issue. Because while it may be easier for one person to hide than, say, a family, or to keep quiet or whatever. You're also one person defending yourself. You're the only person providing for your security, that sort of thing. So there's a whole new set of things that happen when it's just a lone wolf situation. But if that's where you find yourself, then make sure you think it all through and come up with lots of contingency plans to try to make it work good for you. As far as more of a community setting, it's something that I've just had a lot of interest in. I have done research and read books and watched documentaries on, man, that sun is, sorry, I'm snorting. Trying to find a place that it's not blinding me out and bleaching out the camera. You know, I've watched documentaries, I've read books, I've actually even visited a few intentional communities just out of curiosity. And one was very much of a hippie commune, but it's still, you know, something you can learn from them. They became popular, as most of you know, back in the 60s and 70s, you know, the hippie movement. You've got, you know, these hippie communes popping up all over the place. Some of them were, you know, spiritual based, new age spiritual based. Some of them were, you know, sex and drug based, whatever. Most of them didn't last. There are a few, and I mean very few, that still exist. And, you know, there's really not that many successful intentional communities that last more than 2 or 3 years. But yet you look at humanity, from the beginning of humanity till now, we have always lived in very much of a communal type situation, tribal, tight-knit communities. It wasn't, you know, I think the first, in my opinion, the first thing that we saw that kind of started breaking that apart was the Industrial Revolution. People started moving, you know, concentrating into big cities. But even in that, you know, there was still little communities within the big city. But then technology kicked in, and I think it's drove us even more apart. Most people don't even know their neighbors. You know, you may live in an apartment building and not know a single person. There could be hundreds of people living in that apartment building. And you have no clue who any of them are. So as a people, especially modern Western people, this idea of, you know, tight-knit community, tribal type community, is become extremely foreign to us. Americans pride ourselves on our individuality, and I think we cloud that individuality with the fact that, well, you know, if I'm live in a close-knit community where we're all depending on each other, then that's not being an individual. But the thing is if through the research that I've done, if you talk to people that live in close-knit communities, tribal communities, they'll tell you the exact opposite. They'll tell you that their individuality is supported and strengthened because of the strength of the community and the tribe. And that goes from everything from primitive tribal cultures that may still exist up to more modern communities that, you know, they're more modern, but they still kind of have a semblance of that old tribal community culture. You can find them in Europe and Siberia, you know, India, different places like that. And there's documentaries out there on those types of things. I think it could work. But the thing is it doesn't have to be necessarily an intentional community. Maybe it's just your neighbors within a short distance from you that you've built up enough trust that you can trust them and they can trust you, and you share some information and you work out a plan. That's a community. That can be your tribe. To me, a community is more of a group of people kind of working together. A tribe, to me, is much more close-knit. It's like family, at least in my mind. So if you're going to call someone, well, these people are part of my tribe, they're going to be people that you can trust your life with, and they pretty much know most of the things that you have in your plans, and you know theirs. And then there's, kind of your outer community, and it may be, a guy that's a blacksmith that that's 5 miles away, You know, he's a good guy, and he may not know everything about you, but he knows a little bit, and you know a little bit about him, and you can do some trading, and he does work for you, and you may do work for him. That's kind of your outer community. And then you have your inner community, which is, you know, the people in your vicinity, local vicinity, maybe within walking distance. And then you have your very inner circle, and this is all my opinion, your very inner circle, and those are the people that they're like family. They know a lot about you and you them. I think something like that is very possible, and I think it's a good idea. You have to be cautious. I'm a very cautious person, like I said, when it comes to meeting someone and, you know, opening up more to them. You know, there's certain like levels within my mind of, okay, I'm okay with talking to them about this, letting them know about this about my life, but then this stuff over here, not going to happen, not for a while. And that's just how I am. But I think it's possible. You just have to be careful. It's difficult to trust people nowadays. I don't think that people are quite as... There's not as many people out there, in my opinion, that are really genuine, good-hearted people. They exist, for certain. But it's not like it was, you know, 100 years ago where you could trust someone with their handshake and their word. People don't honor that anymore. So you have to be careful with that. But the point is if you can develop that now, because it's going to be... You think it's tough now to develop trust in people now, how much more is it going to be after, you know, something big happens? You're not going to want to trust anyone. So you want to do that kind of stuff now. Try to reach out to people and just kind of feel them out. And that can be different for everyone, and a lot of it may just be where you live. You know, around here, you know, if someone is, you know, kind of living more off the land, more of a homesteading type of lifestyle, like, you know, myself, you know, that may be something to start a conversation with and just kind of feel it out. Got a cat trying to climb up my lap here. And over time, maybe you can build kind of that tribal feel where you guys kind of meet together, but you got to do things together. You can't just kind of talk or kind of have this unspoken, you know, agreement that yeah, you know, we would kind of help each other. No, you got to do things together. You got to know how each other works. You know, maybe you like this guy and he likes you, but maybe your wives won't get along. You know, and then everything happens and you all meet up and you find out the wives hate each other. You gotta do things together, train together, talk about plans, where you're gonna go. You know, where's the food going to be, that sort of thing. If you're going to stay on each individual's property, how you're going to communicate with each other, you know, ways that you're going to, you know, get back and forth to each other's house. Now, maybe they're just your next door neighbor, or they may be a mile or so away. So it's the traveling between the two places, if that's how it works out. And then also kind of work with, you know, have on plan of maybe, like I said, possibilities, you know, like the mechanic down the road, or you know, the farmer that, you know he's a pretty good guy because you've talked to him several times, and he might be someone that you can, you know, trade with when things get rough, that sort of thing. It's good to develop that, and you need to start developing it now as much as possible. Because, like I said, it's going to be really, really difficult to develop that afterwards, because no one's going to want to trust anyone. So if you just have in your mind that, well, oh, Farmer Joe, he's a pretty good guy, my next door neighbor, you know, I think me and him could, you know, team up when everything hits the fan. Possibly, but it's almost like you got to redo your trust once it all happens, because it's going to be difficult for anyone to trust anyone. So work on those things now. Talk with each other. Build up those relationships in your tribes now. And a group is the same way. You know, to me, a group isn't quite as close-knit as a tribe. It's people that work together, have kind of a working relationship. They meet up maybe once in a while. They may not live quite as close as each other to each other as people in a tribe. And these all terms can be interchanged by, they're kind of relative, I guess. These are just terms I use. I know you can get on Viking preparedness, and he goes into it a lot more detail of various different terms that could be used and his definitions for them. But again, I think that the idea of community and tribe is important. Not singling out lone wolves is wrong. I think it's going to be difficult. But you need to be working on that now. Start developing those relationships now, talking with them, getting past those hurdles of trust and stuff now. That way you can weed out the good and the bad. And then once you do that, you have to start meeting together, working on plans together. If you're maybe you have the land and the other person doesn't really, and so the idea is that they're going to come to your house. Well, then they probably need to store their food and some of their supplies and stuff at your house. How does it work once it all happens and you're all together? Is there going to be a command structure, so that not everyone's butting heads together? How's that work? Talk about security, patrols, things like that. These are things that you have to be doing now, or that you should be, so that once it all happens, it all just kind of falls into place. It's no different than training with a firearm, or doing medical training, or learning how to garden. You need to do those things ahead of time, so that when it all happens, the training just kicks in. You need to build those relationships now and try to nail down what those tribes are. And when they may not be necessarily family, like blood family related. But to me, a tribe is someone or a group of people that are that close. I think it would greatly benefit all of you to start really thinking about that, and start thinking about who in your area would kind of qualify as those. If you end up having to be a lone wolf, then you need to also plan for that, because it brings a whole new level of difficulties doing it all by yourself. And so you need to think that out very clearly, and not just, well, I'll take care of my own, I'm fine. No, you need to have a plan. You need to start thinking it out. There are things you need to do, places you need to go. How's it all going to work out? Being, your one and only army by yourself. All right. And then, hey, something else I forgot. Do like I did. Look into these communities. Not saying to join them, but do research. Look into communes. Look into intentional communities, tribal communities. Like I said, there's all kinds of documentaries. I don't have Netflix or anything anymore, but there's ones on there. You can read books, and what you can learn is how they work their problems out. And that's usually what happens. See, I forgot all of this. That's usually what happens, is no one is able to work their problems out. After the new wears off, 6 months, a year after everyone's together and the new wears off, then they find out they hate each other, they can't get along, or they can't work out their differences, and people start leaving. So look into this. I've read books in the past on tribal communities, primitive tribal communities, and how they work out their problems. And then, like I said, you can watch documentaries on communes and intentional communities, and sometimes they'll talk about that. And it's a good idea to look into that, of how people work out their differences. Nowadays, we don't work out our differences. We either have a legal system, or we just stop speaking to them. And after everything's done, and the balloon pops, we don't have that option. We have to stick together to survive. So you need to work out some ideas in your head of how you're going to have conflict resolution when there's no place to go, when you're stuck together. These primitive tribes, they deal with problems in a different way, because they can't leave. It's not like nowadays, if you're in an intentional community and you don't like someone, you just pack up and leave, move out. These tribes and communities out there in the real world, in other countries, they don't necessarily have that option, so they know they have to work out their problems with each other. And that's going to be a big thing that you guys and gals need to do. Alright, this video's gone way longer than I intended. I apologize. I know people don't like long videos. Alright, well, let me know what you think. Some of your ideas and suggestions. Thank you for liking and subscribing and sharing the channel. I love the comments. I will catch you in the next video.